Good evening, everyone. I hope you guys had a great weekend. Welcome to week 5. Just gonna put this over at the side here and we'll get started. So, just going to run through some general housekeeping stuff. So tonight we will be reviewing our usual calendar assignments, what we need to complete this week, just an update on your week 5 discussion board posts, as well as class lecture, some reminders of what we need to complete, and just a review of the academic resources and some references. We have a lot to go through tonight, so I'm going to jump right in. But if anyone has any questions, please raise your hand and I will get to them. But first, let's go to our assignments. So we are, first things first, calendar. We are now officially 1/5 through the semester. We only have 10 more weeks to go. The semester is 15 weeks. We are down to week 10. So just make sure you guys are keeping up with your assignments. The summer goes by very fast. And of course, assignments. So from the deadline, every assignment is due. I have a week to finish completing the review, going through your current event analysis. You should be submitting your current event analysis through Blackboard. So where it shows the date it's due under the weekly units, you should be submitting it there. I know some of you had questions on how to submit, where to submit. So hopefully I believe I got back to everyone. I think the one person I didn't get to was Sunny, but I saw that you were just looking to figure out where to submit it. I think I responded. But also it is on your part of the Blackboard tutorial that I posted. You can see where to submit your assignments. Anyone have any questions? So I'm going to move this down here. This is just my bar, my command bar, this black strip. And over here is the chat box. So I can see questions from the class. If I start to sneeze, it's just allergies. I apologize in advance. So our tasks this week, just to review weekly units, read chapter 5. You'll notice actually at 9 o'clock, you'll see all of the videos, including the introduction to mindfulness, appear again on Blackboard. I uploaded some videos that are a part of my lecture this evening. But if you just wanted to review those videos, they're going to be available, as well as some handouts. Participate in the discussion board, as well as your class lecture and complete chapter 5 quiz. Okay. So I always include the discussion board post tutorial just in case as a reminder, the video for review. We don't review it here, but we're going to be discussing states of consciousness this evening. So first, your questions will be for this week's discussion board post are, how important is sleep? I laugh because I think everybody likes to get a good amount of sleep. How important is sleep to your overall functioning? Are you a person that can operate on 3 to 4 hours every night? You don't need necessarily a lot of sleep versus too much sleep. How does that affect your individual mood? Pros and cons of getting too much sleep. What role does nutrition play into sleeping patterns? Eating as well as exercise. So your overall hygiene. Do you have 4 to 5 screens in your room? That's including your television, your computer, your tablet, your phone. On average now, in the recent year, average American has no less than 4 forms of communication in their room or interaction or any type of screen. And what are some ways in which American cultures differ from other cultures' sleeping perceptions? So, of course, 3 posts on 3 separate days, 1 responding to the initial questions. I broke it down. This is all just 1 question. And then, of course, responding to 2 other students. And the deadline is June 13th. So, Chapter 5 is states of consciousness. Before we get started, I wanted to know if anyone had any questions or comments. Tamara. Okay.
Hi, Professor.
Hello.
My only question that I had, it has to do with the current event analysis. So I uploaded mine through my Google Docs. And I thought that I would be able to still like view it like after I uploaded it, but for some reason I can't see it. But I just want to make sure that you've gotten it.
Through Google Docs or Blackboard?
So I uploaded it on Blackboard, but I did it through Google Docs, if that makes sense. Like there was an option for me to upload it on Blackboard from my Google Docs account.
I will take a look at it. The preset that I have on there shows, I know there's a deadline, and afterwards there's a certain time period where people can submit versus submit and make revisions. So if it's after the deadline, you probably can see that you submitted it, but you may not necessarily see the assignment.
Okay, I just wanted to make sure that it was sent out before the deadline, because I know that I sent it before the deadline, but I want to make sure that you're able to see it.
So, right. So what I can do is I will go in and I use timestamps. So I have my daily, I have a check box that just comes to me, but also I have a backup system where I can see when you submitted it and if your submission is able to be downloaded and viewed. Because here's the thing. I mean, once again, I was a student too. You could get a good 12, it's not you, but I've done this before. I've done it. You could get a good 12, 10 hours extra if you submit it, but the formatting may not necessarily come through. But now you can just see all of that. So I will go through everything. I haven't, I give it about maybe a Blackboard a 24, 48-hour turnover. So it's about that time. So Wednesdays I go in to take a look at all of the assignments. So if there's any issue, I will reach out individually to people.
Okay. Thank you. I just wanted to be sure of that, because I just wanted to make sure that you've gotten it the time that I did submit it.
Yep. Every time you go into Blackboard, it has a timestamp.
Oh, okay. Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So Carla. And if I sound nasally, it's because I'm really trying not to sneeze. Carla, how are you?
Hi, can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. I put it in chat, but I I was wondering for the responses in the discussion board, is there some sort of criteria for what we need to do or say in those responses for them to count toward our response or toward our discussion grade?
So within the, if you look at the rubric, the Blackboard rubric, it will tell you in terms of even responses, you know, saying, oh, it's okay, or great idea. It's sometimes, and it's hard because there's so many responses. The way how Blackboard populates, you have to address that person, even if you reply just to them, you have to address them by name. And the rubric itself, you know, I know there's what, 100 characters, but even if you give 2 good sentences, just being thoughtful,
Okay.
being thoughtful about it. I mean, I see people write dissertations on their first response, and then the second responses, they'll say, you know, I think, you know, great, thank you for sharing, great idea, you know, great point, or I've had a different experience. I think more so it's just about being thoughtful, like any conversation.
Okay.
So I would look at it as a handwritten conversation. That's the best way to explain discussion board.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Problem. Let me see if we have any other hands. Anyone else have any questions before we start? I will do my very best not to completely these all over this presentation. I know it's happening all over the country. It's like a heat wave, but it's not just the temperature, it's the humidity. It feels like you're being sucker punched by the heat. Even though I'm inside, I've never had this experience. So my state of consciousness is it's here and I'm alert, but as soon as we're done with class, I will do what I hate to do. I will take an antihistamine. So I'm going to apologize in advance if you see me just try not to sneeze, and if I sneeze a lot. I know it sounds silly to say, but it does get annoying. So I am going to start off. Yeah. I'm going to start off with our lovely chapter 5. This is where we start to really have some fun with psychology. So I will give you just a heads up. We're going to start off with mindfulness, and we're going to end with we're going to end with the CIA experiment on hallucinogenics. And we're going to also have a link to all of the states in the country that currently have the listing for whether marijuana is medicinal or decriminalized, because that is going to be an important topic going further into the semester. So when we discuss states of consciousness, we look at altered states of thinking, we look at perception, alertness, and comprehension. So your consciousness is your ability to respond to certain sensations and perceptions. Last week, I believe we were discussing how certain perceptions, how people take in information, particularly even substances, the way how we thought about alcohol consumption. It changes, it's different. We have ocular drinking, we have rectal drinking. Well, what happens when it affects your concentration? People are in an altered state of consciousness, which that term alone is up for debate now. So in the most recent Diagnostic Statistical Manual, This is the 6th version. We are also looking at perceptions in media. So we currently have 3 main areas we're going to concentrate on today: sleep and dreaming, hypnosis and meditation, and psychoactive drugs. The first will be hypnosis and meditation. Now, when we look at altered states, we always start off with sleep, but in the chapter, it reviews hypnosis and meditation first. Now, they take that route because they want you to recognize the importance of meditation and the pluses and minuses of it, because once you start getting into sleep and dreaming, then you also start getting into the effects of the medication that we're also taking, and not even just taking because we need to, but because we want to. And even medications such as caffeine. I know people who do not like coffee, are not tea drinkers, but if you told them they would have to stop, being able to drink Dr. Pepper, they would lose their mind. But it's all caffeine. I will be the first person to tell you, I started drinking caffeine at 25 years old. Unfortunately, I started on espresso. Now at what? How old am I? 38. I would love to tell you I'm going to stop drinking my cup of coffee. I've limited my cup of coffee to just 1 cup of coffee. And I'm not saying the measurement, just literally 1 container. But that's going to be difficult. I rely on it to be more alert. That's a medication. It's a substance. So I'm also going to preface this by saying, if there are substances that come up and we discuss the psychoactive effects as well as the negative connotations that are attributed, it's not a slight towards you or towards people who engage in this routine. It is just for clinical representation. Exactly. Sugar. Sugar is one. And sugar is in more things than and this goes to genetically modified foods, because sugar is in more items of foods that we take in, not because we want it to be, but because it's a preservative measure as well. So what is hypnosis? We start off with mindfulness. There was a mindfulness video that will reemerge with all of the other videos after at 9 o'clock Eastern Standard Time this evening. And one of these videos will be hypnotized. So this is from the American Hypnosis Association. Now, this is not the clock. This is a common trope in movies and in certain exercises. People think that you can hypnotize somebody with a clock, with a little watch, preferably gold, has to be dangling. Psychologists agree hypnosis is primarily defined as a narrowed attention and increased suggestibility. You have to really trust the person who you're allowing to hypnotize you. And here is why. You have to be vulnerable. You have to allow that person to dig inside of any mental state that you are currently in and help you retrieve the memory that is there versus the memory that you wish you have. I'm going to repeat that. You have to work with a person to help retrieve the memory that is there versus the memory that you wish you had. Hypnosis is is one of the tools that that people use to stop smoking, but they also work on reasons and habits and the connection that they have towards smoking. There's a social component to smoking. They may have started smoking under duress, and maybe, just maybe, that is a tool in which they use to show anger and frustration. Because think about what you're doing when you're smoking. You're literally lighting something on fire. Does it have to be that? No. However, we can't deny that the action itself, the constant lighting of something on fire, forget the addictive portion of it, the action of burning something. You breathe in, you breathe out. People who smoke cigarettes or smoke, primarily cigarettes, I would say, because there's more of the in and out versus cigars. People who smoke cigarettes have more of a chance of utilizing mindfulness and meditation than any other illness because of the constant deep breathing. Because if you remove the smoking, you have deep breathing exercises. But once again, because of the material and the substances, the addictive qualities of the substance itself, combined with a relaxation technique that, if done daily, not just once daily, can help reduce your stress substantially. So it's almost like, okay, how do we beat this? When people say, I just can't stop smoking. Well, I've seen people say, I just can't stop smoking, but they're also deep breathing. So if we remove that, not just the substance, but we remove the tool and we can help with that. Hypnosis helps. It does help with smoking cessation. I've seen it do wonders. I get nervous when we start to utilize it for other purposes, specifically people who have amnesia or have dissociative fugue states where they're trying to recall a memory or rather a trauma. And just few words can make that memory, or a suggestible phrase can create a false memory. So I'm going to show you a quick video on what happens when people start to go through the process and what it's used for, and then we'll chat.
I have been suffering for years. I cannot continuously take a sleeping pill every night to go to bed.
The pain that I'm experiencing is so debilitating that it's ruining my life.
My anxiety was getting, worse and worse at work. It was really problematic that I had this anxiety at these meetings.
The pain is evident all day long with every movement. It's nonstop. It's like a stabbing spasm pain that won't go away.
I have a condition called tinnitus.
I have a condition called tinnitus.
I've gone to a psychologist, psychiatrist, ear, nose, and throat specialist, and they've told me that there's nothing wrong with me.
What if it gets so loud that I can't hear the birds and the wind? And even the cars outside and my cat's meow. What's going to happen to me if I can't hear that anymore? I don't know what to do.
that's the introduction to their program. They have a series where they work with people. They may work for several weeks, several months, even years, because you need to have a connection. Hello. You need to have a connection. You need to make sure that you are able to trust that person. You are in a vulnerable state. You are asking them to help you process a thought that is so severe that they can no longer address rationally address maybe chronic pain. Chronic pain is another symptom and illness. You see a lot of people who have neuropathy, fibromyalgia, chronic back pain, engage in hypnosis because people almost become, well, some people, and this is not taking away from the medical part of it, but when pain management reaches its peak, where the medication reaches its peak and you almost become you start to experience pain because you're in pain. It's a vicious cycle. There's no more gabapentin, there's no more Neurontin. These are gabapentin and Neurontin are common medications that you see for people who have fibromyalgia, any type of neuropathic pain. And then they send them to psychologists or psychiatrists. And with that, we determine, you know, what would you be willing to do in terms of how you're able to respond? Are you able to address the mindfulness? Are you able to engage in Tai Chi? Tai Chi is also a form of mindfulness. It is a martial arts, but there are several programs. There's one specifically, and I will provide the information within California. It's the Cousins program, where people are able to address their fear, their pain, their efforts that they've already put in, and almost reset. It's a good way to reset. So as a psychologist, specifically a psychologist that specializes in neurological disorders and trauma, in forensic issues, in that realm, whenever you include hypnosis into my particular fields, and I get defensive because I've seen more damage than good. In my limited career, and I'll say I'm being completely biased on this, you know, meditation and mindfulness are great, but when we include hypnosis, if you are a child and someone suggests that you should go through hypnosis, I have yet to sign off on that because children are very suggestible. And if you have been a victim of any form of abuse, especially sexual abuse, the last thing you want to do for a child is to put them in a vulnerable state with an adult. Any questions, comments regarding that? Okay, Rena.
So I have a question. So by hypnosis, then do you mean that I guess you can put something in somebody's mind? I don't know, because you use the word suggestible. So
Yeah.
Can you like modify their behavior by saying, oh, you're this, or this happened to you, or I don't know, like I don't know if you're familiar with Kundalini.
I'm not. Can you explain?
I'm sorry, can you hear me?
Yep, I can.
They say that when you reach Kundalini, once you meditate, it's very you can a level of your mind that can like have you unstable emotionally.
Sorry,
Would be something
it went in and
just
out a little bit. It went in and out a little bit. Is it possible for you to type this?
Sorry.
I'm sorry, you cut out, so I couldn't hear. I
Can
heard
you hear me? Sorry, it dropped.
yeah,
Because of
it's dropping in
it's
and
the
out.
one.
Yeah, it's dropping in and out. I don't know the I don't want to mess up the term, but you said Kundalini?
Yes, Kundalini is usually a level that you reach once you learn how to meditate correctly, and if you don't do it with a professional or the correct way, you can become unstable emotionally, and you can unlock things. You can reach levels of your unconscious, I guess,
Mhm.
to your conscious
Yeah.
mind.
Yeah.
That could be dangerous if you don't do it with a professional. That's what I have read.
Yeah.
Would you say that perhaps hypnosis is something like this, or is hypnosis something you use the word suggestible, like you can just modify someone's behavior by telling them you're this, you're gonna be this, and when you wake up, this is what you're gonna do, and
And
I'm
that's
a bit confused.
okay. So, and Denise, I think you also touched on this with hypnosis. So hypnosis, the purpose of hypnosis is not to change a person's behavior, change a person's character. The purpose of hypnosis is to help the person recover memories, recover their memories. Let me specify this, their memories, recover any information that may contribute to current behaviors, may also, in terms of hypnosis, the suggestibility when it comes to pain management. So it's always about what you're going for. If you're going for pain management, you start to work with someone and say, you know, the pain is no longer there. When you start to feel this pain, you have to almost psych a person out of the pain receptors. So we discuss sensation and perception. There are conditions where people do not feel pain. How is that possible? They have genetic abnormalities where their pain receptors are disconnected. So if they're stabbed in the thigh, they don't feel it. In hypnosis, you're trying to get to a level where you start to mimic the same thing. If you are in the hole when it comes to pain, this is the surface. You're trying to get a person to the point where they start to feel their brain is responsible for pain receptors. Our brain is responsible for all of our emotions. So we're trying to get you to unconsciously target those pain receptors. So when you are in that vulnerable state, maybe there is something holding you back. Maybe you are in pain because you've been in pain. Maybe you're holding on to the pain because that's been a way of getting some form of attention, of affection. It has an effect. So when
So
when you're coming to therapy because you're trying to stop a behavior, we try to help you replace it. That's where the suggestibility comes in.
got it. So
Now,
it is safe to
yeah.
say
Mhm.
that hypnosis will always be based on something that is in you, not something that they can just come and say like, oh, you're gonna be this, like out of nowhere.
Oh,
It's
and
something that's already deep in you, buried. Like
right.
it's not gonna come from anywhere.
And that's the thing. The more manipulated you can be in hypnosis, the more you have to be a part of you have to be invested in whatever you have. Some people come with an idea of a memory that they feel that they just can't unlock all the details, but that's not the case because they've been told over and over again, you know, I feel like you were molested by that guy because he molested your neighbors on on each side of you. He had to molest you too. So you start to live in this cycle. So you may come to hypnosis and say, I believe I've been molested by this person. I believe it. I believe it. Here's the problem with belief. Sometimes we create a solution for a problem that doesn't exist. So it can come off, you want to, you know, say, I believe this, but when we uncover that, guess what? This person did not molest you. They were just nice to you. They did not pick you. And that could be the actual issue, that why wasn't I good enough to be molested? And believe it or not, that is actually something that has come up in counseling. So that's one form of where hypnosis goes wrong. If you have a hypnotherapist that wants to help validate that fear versus let's see what's happening, you'll end up being molested even if you weren't. It's the difference between tell me what you see versus do you see your abuser? Those few words and the change in that sentence can do a lot of damage. So I'm going to go to the chat. So Denise, I hope that answers the question. Yeah, you can create what we call false memories when you go through hypnosis. That's why when it comes to trauma, you really, really have to do the work in terms of understanding, and also as the hypnotherapist, you can't go in saying, I'm going to get this out of this person. Because don't get me wrong, when you go through a lot of this, you know, counseling, you start to build a level of confidence, but that confidence can become conceit. You can be conceited. You can't go in thinking I'm going to get this memory out of them, or they're going to be better after they have these these sessions with me, and these emotions are going to come out. No, what you could be doing is pushing that person to a false memory. So Denise, I hope that answers your question. And yeah, comedy shows. Well, it's also power of suggestion, Carla. So comedy shows, I've seen that. I've been to 2 of them where the person said, no, I actually did. I was out of control. I clucked like a chicken. But think about what's happening. Rarely do you go into a comedy show and you know, especially if there's a hypnosis, you already know that you're going to be in this realm. It's hard to say if that person believed it so much that it happened versus they placed so much trust in the hypnotherapist that they were able to be hypnotized, because that's really what it is. Hypnotherapy, it's all about your relationship with the person that that's doing the hypnosis. Mm-hmm. So does it help the body stop deteriorating? To a certain degree, yes. So people who have fibromyalgia, I use that because that's a common one where we see hypnosis work, where they may have fibromyalgia, they may have chronic back problems. Your body talks to you. Your body tells you exactly what's going on. It could be, you know, if you have a chronic pain, there's a certain, it's a recipe for a lot of things. It could be, you know, certain chemical imbalances going from one part of the brain to the other. It can be an injury. It can, you know, I've seen people who are in accidents and they constantly had this injury, but the injury is a representation of the accident. They can't get over the accident because the experience was so traumatic, but versus that, and it's just a cycle. So if you get that person off that cycle for a little time, maybe the medication can have more of a chance to work. Because medication is just a chemical that's outside of your body trying to mimic a chemical that should be naturally occurring in your body. So it's trying hard to help, but if we build walls all the time our brain is so powerful. It's really difficult. So I'm hoping I'm answering these questions. When I first started counseling, I worked in Framingham, in the penal system in Framingham. And I was actually, I then did part of my internship in Walpole. And part of they had several different programs going on. And one of the programs was hypnosis with sex offenders who also were, who identified a long history of sexual abuse that they endured. And, you know, they medicated throughout their lives, whether it was through alcohol or other drugs. And they had problems. Some people experience chronic back pain. They also would say, well, I would go to the hospital in order to get drugs. I would say I had diverticulitis. Now, if you work in a hospital, DVT is it's one of the best ways to get certain substances to help numb pain that you experience physically, but is derived emotionally. And you think, well, of course, it's pain, right? No, you can be hit by a bat in your knee and it's not an emotional source. But diverticulitis was one of those medications, one of those ailments people would come in and, you know, they say, oh, I have chronic this pain, I have chronic stomach pain. And before, you know, unfortunately, you know, providers caught on, they were getting opiates, barbiturates, things to help them rest, but also to sedate. So we're gonna get into that, especially when it comes to sleep and dreaming. So that was the hypnosis section, hypnosis and meditation. I am an advocate of the app Calm. I don't have any professional, I don't make any money over suggesting them, but the app called Calm, C-A-L-M. I personally use this app because it's calming. They have something called MSR on top of it. It's a very soft way to talk. It's about sound and sensation, and you'll find that people massage the microphone or they'll crumple pieces of paper, and it's always concentrating on one sound because we live in a very multi-stimulus environment. So after we finish with sleep and dreaming, and especially psychoactive drugs, I will advise you to look into Calm. Any questions before we continue? So I'm going to issue a disclaimer again. In the sleep and dreaming section, we're going to be discussing certain parasomnias. I'm adjusting my shirt a lot because if you notice, I'm going like this. I was practicing something I'm going to be implementing in our class later in the semester, and I think I hit a nerve. It did not go well. So sleep and dreaming. If there are any children in your room, I would say now is the time for them to leave. And I'm going to proceed with the lecture. So, what are the basic rhythms of sleep? It's not you, it's I just want to be mindful. I want to be mindful because there is a topic that, well, there's actually a couple that could, no kid should hear. So what are the basic rhythms of sleep? You have REM, stage 1, 2, 3, and every night, and of course 4, but every night you go through all of these stages in several forms, several times. But here's the thing, I say every night you go through, but that might not be the case. Not everybody goes through these stages. So non-REM sleep occurs in 4 stages. So REM stands for rapid eye movement. So we have our stage 1 is our light sleep, and your stage 4 is your deep sleep. If you are being aroused out of stage 4 deep sleep, that's usually where we start to look and find our sleep disorders. So I'm going to show you this quick video just to give you a little example, and then we'll discuss. And it's small, but it's more of just a discussion video.
Understanding our sleep cycle gives us insight into how our sleep patterns work and can help us identify reasons why our sleep may be disturbed. We have 2 main types of sleep, non-REM and REM sleep. Non-REM sleep is characterized by 3 stages of sleep that progressively deepen from light sleep to restful sleep to deep sleep. REM, or rapid eye movement sleep, is characterized by dreaming and is the state in which restoration of our brain and body functions occurs, including energy conservation and memory consolidation. We cycle through stages 1, 2, 3, and REM throughout the night. Each cycle takes approximately 90 minutes and repeats throughout the night. Also, as the night progresses, we increasingly spend a longer period of time in REM, which leads to sleeping becoming more restorative or more restful the longer we sleep. So let's talk about each stage individually. In stage 1, we are in transition between being awake and asleep. This is a state of very light sleep, and when we are awakened in stage 1, we may claim or feel we weren't sleeping. Stage 2 is a light stage of sleep and is characterized by the slowing down of brain waves. Stage 3 is a stage of deep sleep. When we are woken from this stage, we are often confused and disoriented. This is the stage during which bedwetting, sleepwalking, or night terrors are experienced. Stage 4, or REM stage, is the last stage in this cycle. During this stage, the eyes usually move fast in different directions and breathing patterns become irregular. Our limbs may also become paralyzed, though the feeling is temporary. People who are awoken from this stage may have bizarre tales or wild dreams. Once we leave REM sleep, we start the cycle all over again. Our sleep patterns are impacted by a range of factors, including our stress levels, low mood and depression, worry or anxiety, physical health conditions, medications, and worry about sleep. Alcohol and many prescription drugs can help facilitate stage 1 and 2 of sleep, but often have detrimental impacts on our more restorative stage 3 and REM sleep.
So why do we sleep? Well, it's restorative. The better sleep you get, the more you allow your body to go through this pattern of stage 1, 2, 3, and REM. You're able to retain things. You're able to remember, you're able to recall memories without issue. Your language improves. Your metabolism gets a chance to work. When people do not sleep or do not have sufficient sleep for their genetic makeup, and I'll say genetic makeup. Not everybody needs the same amount of sleep. There is a general, thought to it, but not everybody needs the same amount of sleep. But when you don't get enough sleep for your genetic makeup, your metabolism completely shuts down. It can't work. It needs time to work. There's a point in sleep where it's restorative. So what happens when people oversleep? When you get too much sleep, where you sleep to escape, that's where the disorders come in, because there is a point where you sleep excessively, and your excessive sleep is not seen as restorative, but as a form of, it's almost a voluntary coma. You're looking to avoid certain events. And when people usually oversleep, or they have a form of hypersomnia, they're sleeping during the day. So they're sleeping opposite of their biological clock. So the times that they should be allowing their metabolism to take in food, to have access to sunlight, to utilize all of the external resources that help it function, it's shut down. It's like a subway system. If prime time is 5 to 10 a.m. and you're shut down from 5 to 9:45, how effective is that subway? Same thing. So Vincent van Gogh famously used to believe in microsleep. However, Vincent van Gogh also cut off his own ear and is believed to have had, if he were clinically diagnosed today, he would have been diagnosed with bipolar depression. So take this with a grain of salt. He liked microsleeps. So he would get little, and not even cat naps. He would have to sleep. This is kind of leading into narcolepsy, involuntary ways of getting in just little cat naps so that he can be more functional during the day. So I want to just show you a very popular video of what happens when you adhere to this logic of, I'll sleep when I'm dead. Guess what? You're dead. There's no waking up. The whole point of sleep is that you're able to be aroused again. When you're dead, you're dead. So this is what happens while you're driving.
In Toronto, Shanann's ability to drive while tired is about to be put to the test.
Okay, Shanann, you're all wired up.
Excellent.
Are you ready to go?
Oh, I'm ready.
Go out and have fun.
See you in a bit.
This is an exercise to determine how Shanann is going to cope with his sleep deprivation. It's a test of his physical and mental performance. During this exercise, he will have lapses of attention where we will be able to record micro sleep. And you just need a few seconds of loss of attention to cause a serious accident.
In the first test, the instructor uses his arms to direct which way Shanann should turn. He is deliberately leaving this as late as possible, so Shanann needs to pay attention.
I wasn't nervous at all. I thought I could drive, and this was going to be a piece of cake. On the first few runs, it actually went pretty good, so I got a little confident and relaxed, and that relaxed, I think, kind of got to me as well.
Okay, kind of fun?
What Shanann doesn't realize is the real test is to see how he deals with surprises.
That was a little freaky. Didn't expect to see that jaw coming out. See if we can get faster this time. Yeah, when you're sleep deprived, your reaction time is just gone.
Shanann is failing every test, and in the next one, the instructor is going to do something quite unexpected.
Got the mirror there. So I feel quite horrible right now. If I wasn't sleep deprived, I probably wouldn't have hit those at all. Just would have noticed that he wasn't going to move and stopped ahead of time or slowed down and picked my own route instead of just kind of dozing off and almost forgetting that I was even supposed to turn. And oh.
How did you find the driving test?
Oh, that was a lot of fun.
And you think you did well?
No.
What was your overall performance?
I don't think I did well. Unless you count, crashing into a bunch of pylons.
What if it was a brick wall?
I hopefully would have used common sense. I'm hoping.
You didn't use common sense?
No.
What if I told you you had 18 microsleeps?
18.
Ranging from 3 seconds to 13 seconds. And the average was 7.8 seconds.
While I was driving.
Yeah.
Unbelievable.
A microsleep is where the brain grabs a quick nap without your permission. They strike without warning, which is why they are so dangerous. Shanann's poor driving proves that sleep deprivation has radically affected his performance. But as his tiredness increases and the sleep debt grows, the next casualty will be his state of mind. It's time for Dr. Hussain to give Shanann the results of the whole experiment.
Sleep deprivation has harmed you. Mm-hmm. You have performed much poorer than you had expected to. If we had to continue this for another week and did a blood sugar sample, we would see that your blood sugar levels would be in the diabetic range.
Interesting.
It's going to take you a long time to recover that sleep debt. Well, of the 2 hours of testing that you had a total amount of 25 minutes of sleep.
How was I driving?
You tell me. What was even more alarming, and I've never seen this before, is that he went into full sleep while operating that vehicle.
25 minutes of sleep was recorded during the road test. Most naps occurred when Shanann sat idle between tasks, but sleep was also verified whilst the vehicle was in motion. So this experiment proves that you can have your eyes open, drive a car, and yet be fast asleep. And this explains what happened next.
If we recorded sleep on his brain activity, how was he operating this vehicle? And of course, what comes to mind is what's called automatic behavior. This is very like sleepwalking.
So what do you guys think? Yeah. Remember that muscle memory we were talking about last week? When you drive, sometimes you just it's like, oh, I'm going to work. Yeah. And once again, this is why I gave the disclaimer. This is not about accusing or not even accusing, but this is not about making anyone feel bad. It's literally clinically to discuss this is what is happening. More people are micro sleeping than ever before. Even when I would like for you guys just to do an exercise. It does it without your permission because you're staying up without its permission. Let me put it back on you and me. We stay up without our brain's permission. How many times does our body tell us we need to just stop? We're tired. We're tired. We can't afford to stop. We're tired. We need to, like you said, you have to drive home. You have to, get up. You have to, when you get home, I'm pretty sure there's other things to do. And by the time you get to bed, you're tired. And that's why I asked, how many screens do you have when you on or around you when you go to sleep? Our eyelids, if you were to close your eyelids, and yes, it's dark, but after 5 minutes, that darkness, you adjust. Think about what happens if you are in a room where maybe it's dark, maybe it's dark. And I say maybe because some people fall asleep with their television on. I do. I have my television on a timer. Why do I do it? Because I have to. I need to hear sound. You fall asleep with the phone in your hand or the phone next to you. Some people have the phone now in their bed and they have a stand on the side. Can't sleep without the TV on. There's several questions I would have. One, if you can't sleep without the TV on, are you sleeping because you need the light, you need the sound, you need both? Is it a fear component? Is it a routine that is hard to break? Yeah. Are you sleeping with these mechanisms on because it is a way to feel close or connected with someone or something? Or you're afraid that when you go to sleep, because when you're sleeping is your most vulnerable state.
In Toronto,
Sleep is where people and things can get us.
REM sleep behavior disorder, or RBD, is a condition experienced during the REM phase of sleep in which a person acts out his dreams. Normally, during the REM phase of sleep, our brain is active similar to when we are awake, but our muscles are paralyzed to prevent us from acting out our dreams. Unfortunately, in REM sleep behavior disorder, this transient muscle paralysis is lost. REM sleep behavior disorder affects 1 in 200 people, with middle-aged and older men being affected 10 times more commonly than women. Risk factors may include psychiatric medicines, degenerative brain diseases like Parkinson's disease or Lewy body dementia, and brain injury. Symptoms include sleepwalking, screaming, kicking, hitting, or even punching while asleep, posing a threat to self and the sleeping partner. Once suspected, patients need to see a sleep specialist or neurologist. The doctor may then order a sleep study to confirm the diagnosis. Although there is no cure, a medication such as clonazepam may curb violent sleep-related behavior in up to 90% of the patients. For more information, including a list of expert doctors and hospitals, visit
So you said it. You used to be afraid of the dark. And even as an adult, that's when you sleep with the TV on. So now it's become part of your sleep hygiene. It's a behavior. No, it's okay. It's okay. There's no judging. No. But at least you know why this is happening. Some people don't understand why they have certain reactions, and they'll resort to, medications, therapy, but it doesn't necessarily get to the root, and they need to know right now, so they'll go to hypnosis. And that's why I get very cautious in saying, okay, so if you're going to go to somebody who is a hypnotherapist, do you have an end game? Do you have an answer in your head, or are you going in with an open mind? Mm, yeah. Hmm. Hmm. There's a lot of fears people have in the thought that they're not able to be as responsive or respond at all when they're sleeping, prompts them to leave lights on. Think about it. We're all, as children, parents give you night lights, you work your way to behavior. If I were to tell you, you know what, you no longer know how to tie your shoes, everybody in this class will stop tying their shoes. If you have laces, sneakers, you no longer can do that. What are the odds that you will fail in the next 24 hours if you're wearing a form of shoe wear that requires laces? Everyone, because it's something that has been implanted. It's constant. When you have certain things to support a stressor, especially if they're negative, it stays with you longer. But it can be modified. It just takes work. You have to replace a behavior and learn a new one simultaneously. So with sleep deprivation, there's people who do not sleep. They don't sleep. And it's gotten so bad that the initial reason why they stop sleeping, because the behavior has now taken over the stressor, it's a cycle. So they're like, oh, I've just always been like that. And think about when this is happening. If you have REM behavior disorder, which that's where we start to really see a lot of sleep deprivation and parasomnias, sleepwalking. They say, stage 3, yeah, you see it, but it's really stage 4, because that's where memories are permanently stored. So if you have a really bad memory, but then you tell me, I don't sleep very well, it's not, it makes perfect sense. Any questions, comments? There are over 100 sleep disorders. Clinically, there are over 100 sleep disorders. You could have shift work disorder, where you have worked a certain shift for, let's say, 2-3 years consecutively, and now your body clock is so attuned to that shift that you can fall asleep on day 3, but then be up, have minimal sleep the next 3 days, and then off 2 days, then 3 days, and off 2 days. But then maybe you work overnight and your body starts to get accustomed to that. So then you only need a certain amount of sleep, and maybe you need a certain amount of daylight to feel comfortable sleeping. Your body sees it as, oh, it's time to go to sleep. Circadian rhythm sleep disorder is more genetic than pretty much any of the other parasomnias, where if you grew up in an environment where everyone seemed to wake up really early, and you've gone through this for like 20, 30 years, and then you have a generation of kids who also see you do that, your body starts to not only behaviorally get accustomed to it, but then genetically get accustomed to it. You see this a lot in military families. Shift work, circadian rhythms. There's certain people who, you have CIA, Black Op, FBI agents who can stand up and stay up anytime, any day, for days on end. And their experience with psychosis is not as severe as somebody who hasn't had that. Yeah. Yeah. 36 hours. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. When I was going through part of my residency, and I worked in the psych ER, my all-time high. Every physician, every provider has their all-time high. When I was finishing at UMass, my all-time high was 37 hours and 42 minutes. Yep, 37 hours, 42 minutes, 37:42, yeah. And I did it through the snowstorm of 2015. I think that was when they closed down like Mass Pike 90. Like all of New England was just covered under snow. You couldn't get anywhere. So I was stuck. We were sleeping in cots and everything in the 37 hours and 42 minutes. And then after that, I drove home. I slept for, I just remember waking up. I can't even remember. Like I slept so much that I felt drunk when I woke up. Mm-hmm. No, it wasn't healthy, but it wasn't abnormal. Mm-mm. Because I had done 24, 22, 24, 20, like to stay up certain hours means nothing. And that's what I'm saying. Certain professions, certain clinical, not even clinical, just sometimes genetics and profession work hand in hand, and it's not healthy. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And you will find parents experience this more often than not. It's not healthy. Mm-hmm. It's not healthy. You feel awful. You feel sick. I mean, I could not do that now. Yeah, you feel sick. You're out. Your digestive system. People who have severe sleep deprivation either have really poor digestion, nausea. They are not able to process food the way how they normally would. They may be constipated or more often have diarrhea. They have really poor bowel habits. Very poor. The lack of sleep creates a problem with your digestive tract. Yeah. Yep. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So, yeah. Mm-hmm. Yes. Your brain, there are your body, not directly from sleep, but the functioning of your organs will start to fail. Your ability to process and break down information as well as substances will decrease. And the video itself showed that the doctor said, look, at this point, your sugar level is so high that you're considered pre-diabetic, and you're not a diabetic. Or this would be in the diabetic range. So you're not able to break down and process sugar. Your endocrine system is shutting down. Your system shuts down because it needs, sleep is regenerative. It needs time to breathe. It needs time to rest. Because it is all medical. So the ICD code, so we switched from having a separate code from international coding system where you have medical diagnosis. So it's all under one book. It's just that the field is listed as mental, but it's all a medical diagnosis. So insomnia is considered a medical diagnosis. Hypersomnia is considered a medical diagnosis. I mean, insomnia itself used to be a symptom of other disorders. It is now a full disorder all on its own. So when we are not able to sleep, we also start having weird dreams. And when you have micro sleep, you can still have weird dreams in micro sleep too. Some of the most common, of course, are the falling dream. You feel like you're falling, but you're not. And how to interpret dreams. Depending on your school of thought, you can have a psychodynamic view, a Freudian view, where you feel that what is happening to you unconsciously in your dreams are wishes, are fears, and you use those to disguise, your true feelings externally. So people want dream analysis. They want synthesis. If you have a dream that's so lucid, if you remember this dream, is it really going to happen? Or, everybody was gray and then, there's just one red thing. And there's been a lot of different schools of thought. Can we see color in dream? Or is your dream in sepia? Is it like a filter? Usually vibrant colors don't necessarily appear, and it's very hard for us to latch on to that one color. Dreams become more of a cultural definition because there is the dream, oh, I dreamed about fish and loaves, so somebody's pregnant. Or if you're naked in your dream, that means that somebody is going to die. The person thinking their dream, losing teeth, flying. They're all cultural, they're colloquialisms attached to these dreams when in fact it could be, it could be a representation of something bigger. Or, and I know people don't like to hear this, if you eat broccoli, there are certain cruciferous foods. There's certain green foods. There's certain colorful foods. There are certain vitamins and enzymes that have such a potency with your with your biological chemistry that it will create hallucinogenic images, especially when you sleep. I challenge people to eat certain foods and I don't tell them what, maybe if they have dreams, if they don't have dreams. I don't put that idea in their head, but I just say, you know what, maybe just change up your diet. You notice this a lot when people change their actual diet and routine. They may have more dreams because your brain may be more active. Your brain also may have more rest. So that takes us to the sleep-wake disorders. So here's where you will find insomnia. Yeah. Carla, I will tell you, I have yet to not have a weird dream. And not even dream. I can't even say it's a weird dream. Just I can remember what I dreamt. I can usually hands down count on this. If I eat beef and broccoli, I can remember generally what I dreamt about the night before. But also you have to think about if you're eating very close to your bedtime. Some people are binge eaters, not because they want to be, but because it's the only time they can eat. And that still doesn't mean you're not a binge eater. They may end up eating one meal and then one half of a meal or 1.5 meal because they were working all day and they just forgot and it slipped their mind. Guess what? When you don't eat at regular intervals, your body and especially your brain says, wait a minute, I need that food to be processed so I can get this oxygen. I need to breathe. I have too much carbon dioxide. I need some more oxygen. I need some nutrients here. When your body gets that and your brain gets that, it clams onto it and it does freaky things. It really does. So you start to feel, wait a minute, what's happening here? How come I can't, think? So now we have sleep-wake disorders. Insomnia, it can be temporary or it can be chronic. but you notice it's not permanent. This is one of the best disorders to have and the worst disorders to have. Because when you can't sleep, nothing makes sense. There are periods in your life where you experience insomnia, but then you can experience insomnia, but you don't necessarily have insomnia disorder. To have insomnia disorder, you're looking at no less than 6 months of interrupted sleep, inability to get to sleep, inability to stay asleep, inability to work because you have lacked sleep. And almost a fear of sleep. And I say almost because that's where we start to address root causes of insomnia. Is it chemical? Is it a biological component? There is a community around Ikaria, Greece, where it is a mountain-based community. And I love the fact that of all shows, Law and Order Special Victims Unit actually used, and I'm not sure if they used the particular community, but they referenced the disorder where genetically you stop sleeping. You stop sleeping to the point where it looks like psychosis, and it becomes psychosis because your brain can't function. And eventually your organs shut down. You start to experience liver function. Your endocrine system shuts down. You're not able to regulate your hormones, and your body says, you know what, I'm tired, I give up. And you can't medically, you can put people to sleep, but can't medically do so all the time. Behavioral approaches to sleep managing insomnia, such as sleep restriction and stimulus control, are quite effective. So when I say how many screens are in your room, I've worked really hard because I was diagnosed with insomnia disorder. Let's see, we're in the year 2021. When I think I turned 19, diagnosed with insomnia disorder. Working, my all-time best staying up was 37:42. Outside of that, days I've been up and I could not sleep. Combination of exposure, exposure to long exposure to I would say military lifestyle. My father was in the service for years, well, for decades, and I witnessed a lot of military life that you should not. And I refused to sleep because I was in the military without being in the military. I'll put it that way. And my cure, because what the doctor said I needed to do, I told them there's no way possible I could do that because I'm going to college, or I'm in college. I was 19, I'm in college. I have all these goals. I decided in school I wanted to be a triple major. What do you think that does? If you have a certain genetic setup, you have a certain level of motivation, and you feel that sleep is not really necessary, what do you think that's going to do to you? Nothing good. I don't usually add myself as an example, but for this, I want people to realize when sleep-wake disorders happen, you need to address it. There's so many ways we can lose sleep. So what ended up happening was I think at that time, because my memory recall is terrible when it comes to that stuff, right? So I did do a sleep study. And they told me genetically, yeah, everything that you research, because I was that nerd researching genetically, you have a predisposition to not sleep at certain times, but you have to have an appropriate sleep hygiene. And that's what I did. And the time that I stopped and I decided I was going to go back to school, and I said, well, I already have insomnia, so might as well do shift work so I can stay up at night. Doesn't work that way. So you have to be mindful. And I added a link for sleep disorders here. So when you click on the PowerPoint presentation or the PDF, go to this, and this is the American Psychiatric Association. I got so invested because I saw how much damage I was doing to my own body. And stubbornness doesn't really win. You can't will your way. It's not a cultural thing. You can't will your way. You can't overwork. You can't tire yourself out. You can't catch up on sleep. You have sleep apnea where your breathing gets interrupted. You then may develop hypersomnia, which is also a great indicator of increased depressed mood, sleepiness during the day, but also baby apnea, which is otherwise known as sudden infant death syndrome, where you stop sleeping. I mean, you stop sleeping, but you also stop breathing. Infants have to sleep on their backs to make sure. So one of the more comedic disorders, which sadly isn't comedic, is narcolepsy. A sudden shift, almost like microsleep, but lasts longer. So I want to show you a syndrome called Sleeping Beauty syndrome. So cataplexy is it's a non-descriptive form of narcolepsy. So it's underneath the parasomnia, where cataplexy can also be caused by genetic abnormalities and also other forms of stress. So I've seen people with cataplexy who they question whether or not it's narcolepsy or it's a silent seizure. So before we talk about Sleeping Beauty syndrome, there is something called sexsomnia. And this is why I wanted the children out of the room. Because sexsomnia is a defense, and it actually is a parasomnia where people exhibit and perform sexual acts while they are completely asleep. They are in stages 2 and 3, and sometimes 4. And yes, sex to completion. It is formally recognized in the DSM-5, yes. However, I included this article, and it's linked to the journal of, it's actually a legal journal, but for forensic evaluators, this is one of the more it's painstaking. Because there is science to back up sexsomnia. However, it is now introduced as legal defense, and there are current cases, but there have been several cases where it's been used and it's been effective. People versus Ellington is one. So this is an article that people can review. No, you cannot use this article for your current event analysis. You have to look up your own. But for your next paper, which will address chapters 4 through 8, you can look up these references, the Journal of American Academy of Psychology and the Law, which is basically a long way of saying Journal of Forensic Psychology. Affluenza is different. So affluenza was a court case, I will say this, where the parents or the lawyer said the kid is not at fault for killing the people that he ran over or the people in the car. I can't remember the details of the case, but I remember they use affluenza, and affluenza isn't influenza. Affluenza is being affluent and basically your parents not parenting you and saying you still have to be a decent human being. So that case actually got overturned in Texas. There was a judge that said that's BS. Said, I don't know who you paid and who's affluent there, but it was a big controversy. So the judge, he was sanctioned. The lawyer, the lawyer wasn't sanctioned, but the judge was sanctioned because it was a jury. It wasn't a jury verdict. It was a bench verdict. So there was like sexsomnia could be seen as, affluenza is different. Sexsomnia, there have been cases, and of course the question is, how can you tell? How can you tell that this person is engaging in sex without their knowledge? Or there's been tests, there's been brain imaging, there's been people who have been experiencing this, and you find this a lot with with married couples, with committed couples. And they've done empirical research, they've done, had scans, electrodes. So there is precedent for it. It's included in the DSM. However, it's a little difficult when it's one thing if you are in bed with somebody who agreed to be in bed with you, who is aware of this and who is willing and may not in the moment, but is willing, and they've expressed that. And this is where it becomes very questionable still, as opposed to a person who is staying in their room and saying, oh, I'm sleepwalking to the 10-year-old's room. And this is one of the cases. So right here, if you see, there was a case involved a severely obese male with obstructive sleep apnea who was accused of 2 episodes of sexual abuse against his 10-year-old stepdaughter. The legal outcome of the case was not reported. Now, personal opinion aside, if you are severely obese, what are the and you have obstructive sleep apnea, so that means you stop breathing at night. So how is it that you have the energy as well as the gauge and guide to find the 10-year-old stepdaughter's room? As if I were the consultant or the expert witness in this case, that would be my first argument too. Right. Well, and once again, this is where we discuss, it's hard, and just because it's something that is published and there's empirical evidence to support it, does not mean you always have to agree, even as a provider, as a clinician, but you still have to treat it based on the science. You have to treat it based on the evidence. Some people, I know psychiatrists who do not believe in bipolar disorder. They don't believe in it. They believe that it's a form of manic depression. If they like manic depressive disorder, and they believe that it's a part of a personality disorder, it should be more attributed there. But they still prescribe a medication that would be listed under bipolar disorder, but you can see in their diagnosis where what would easily be seen as bipolar disorder, they would use several different other diagnoses because they do not agree with that grouping. I think there are certain personality disorders that need to be revisited in terms of naming. Antisocial personality disorder doesn't give the personality disorder enough justice, because because it's not as dangerous. It should be psychopathic personality disorder. It doesn't give it enough justice. So Sleeping Beauty syndrome, Klein-Levin syndrome. It is a rare disorder that are, and like I said, over 100 sleeping disorders. It is predominantly found in adolescent males, characterized by excessive sleep, hypersomnia, various degrees of hyperphagia, meaning increased appetite and food consumption, cognitive disturbances, and hypersexuality. So let me rephrase this. Sleeping Beauty syndrome is my teenager sleeps a lot, right? My teenager sleeps a lot. He eats a lot, but he sleeps a lot during the day. He eats a lot. He doesn't pay attention, and he is obsessed with sex. So could that be and are we stereotyping, or is there something to this? So you see what I mean when it comes to disorders, and you may not necessarily agree, but if the science is there, and when I say science, I mean the actual research of this disorder, and you have to have an open mind about this. The sexsomnia, the argument for that case, I do not agree with. But in terms of Sleeping Beauty syndrome, okay, if that's what this is defined as Sleeping Beauty syndrome, what makes this different from being a teenager? No, you're not combative. This is great. This is the whole point, because I want people to really think, we can put a label on anything, but what makes it a disorder? What makes it a syndrome versus human development? So I'm going to play this and then we'll discuss.
Sleep. Just say the word and people will have a reaction. Most adults will tell you they don't get enough. And it's true, we are a sleep-deprived nation. But what about when you have the opposite problem? When you can't stay awake, when sleep essentially hijacks your life, and the only time you feel okay is when you're not awake. The condition that can mimic that famous fairy tale, Sleeping Beauty, is actually quite ugly and can steal people's lives right out from under them. Here's a look inside a condition called hypersomnia.
We talked a little bit about why you're here, what symptoms you've been experiencing. Sigurdsson, let's start.
Late on a Friday night,
we're blessed to be here.
Sigurdsson Jacobson and his parents are in Atlanta.
Where we live, nothing has worked.
Over 3,000 miles from home.
They couldn't find out what was wrong with me there.
Home is Iceland. They have crossed the Atlantic, searching for a way to help their son stop sleeping his life away.
When they started, I was started to give him a hard time. I thought he was lazy, and I was too hard on it, definitely. I didn't know what was wrong.
The craving for sleep began 6 years ago when Sigurdsson was 16 years old, an ambitious student and talented member of Iceland's national sports team.
Yeah, I slept through Christmas a couple of times, definitely. Like a few days after, I would still be sleeping like 20 hours.
He dropped out of college, quit sports, lost most of his friends.
People say it's just depression or vitamin something, problems with vitamins, and
getting up is really hard to do.
As the years ticked by, Sigurdson's bottomless need for sleep took over his life.
Did you ever think it was in your head, like a mental problem, psychological?
Yeah, definitely a lot of times. Sometimes I was like, maybe I am just lazy.
A neurologist in Iceland finally accurately diagnosed him with idiopathic hypersomnia, which is defined as sleeping excessive amounts. It is thought to be a rare disorder that affects approximately 1 in 3,000 people.
How many milligrams do you remember? 40, 60?
Sigurdsson tried medication and stimulants that didn't work. They kept his body awake, but his brain was essentially living in a sleep state. Life was a fog.
You're using the word tired and fatigued. Are those different than being sleepy?
Emory brain health neurologist Dr. David Rise, one of the leading experts in the world on hypersomnia.
When you listen to him, he sleeps too much. He has a hard time waking up. He takes long naps. He has sleep drunkenness. Those are the hallmarks of any sleeps more than 11 hours a day in a 24-hour period. That's hypersomnia.
When we go to sleep at night, there's an area of the brain that becomes active in the forebrain, the ventolateral preoptic area, VLPO. It uses the inhibitory neurochemical GABA, like a brake, to suppress wake-promoting substances such as histamine, dopamine, noradrenaline. At the end of sleep, this brake is released and people wake up. People with some forms of hypersomnia, the brake is never really released. Sleepiness persists, seemingly due to the presence of a naturally occurring Valium-like substance that magnifies the sleep-inducing sedating effects of GABA.
That substance acts upon the GABA receptor to make the GABA receptor function more efficiently. So it sort
That's what puts you to sleep.
gives you sedation, hypnotic sedation. This is like a sleeping pill, okay? So this agent we've shown acts at this same receptor in a very similar fashion as Ambien does, and that there are ways, different other medicines that can counteract or competitively get rid of that effect.
Rye treats close to 600 hypersomnia patients from the United States and several other countries. It's Rye's research, study, and use of a drug called flumazenil that is having a life-altering impact for patients.
It's a drug approved by the FDA for people that are essentially overdosed or responding too well to benzodiazepines like Valium, or if you overdosed on it by mistake or intentionally.
When a typical person takes flumazenil, there is no effect felt. But when some people with hypersomnia take it, it is a magic elixir. It counteracts the sedating effects of GABA and sleep-related pathways. After more testing and a sleep study, Sigurdsson will be given the drug. It works for about 50% of patients.
This is my last resort. If this doesn't work, I don't know.
On your mark, go.
Anna Sumner is the poster child for what flumazenil can do.
If you'd told me 6 years ago that this would be my life, I wouldn't have thought it was possible.
Over a decade ago, Anna was sleeping up to 18 hours a day. She had to take a leave from her job as an attorney. In her 30s, her parents had to take care of her. She saw Dr. Rye and his team.
And said, look, I'm either lazy or crazy, but I need somebody to tell me which one. This is what I was going to show you.
Rye gave Anna flumazenil. At the time, she was the only person in the world taking it. Today, 100 physicians across the U.S. prescribe it for hypersomnia patients.
Today, I have everything that I never thought I would have.
That includes her career, a husband, a son. As for sleep, she gets 7 to 8 hours a night. It's no longer the center of her life.
Hi, I'm Anna.
Anna has come to watch Sigurdsson take his first dose of flumazenil.
And the man himself.
He was anxious to meet someone else who has hypersomnia.
Awesome. How are you?
I'm good.
Good to see you. So how did this all start for you?
With someone fluent in his suffering, Sigurjin is revealing.
Your will to do things just kind of dies. It's just, and then you're always trying and trying again, and then it gets worse, and you just kind of die inside, like from being tired all the time.
With his parents
And the
medical team there, he takes the dose and waits.
Like, what am I supposed to be feeling? I just.
Well, we don't want to tell you what.
No, I feel like before, so.
Yeah, but it's only been like 3 minutes.
Yeah.
A few minutes later.
I can like feel this irritation I always had in my legs. Like, my body is telling me to go move.
You feel it now?
Yeah.
Really?
Just
like before?
to go running or go do something. Feeling something right now, actually. It's a weird feeling. I'm not sure what it is. It's in my. It's probably because of the tablet. Wow, it's kicking in right now. Yeah. It's like yeah.
I'm so tickled back here.
So yeah.
So talk more about what you're feeling.
I don't know how to describe this. It's like my eyes are being lifted up, and what? And yeah, it's a strange feeling.
Is it scary? I mean, is it?
No, it feels good. It feels really good. And now I feel like too normal, like too energetic. I don't know. I don't even remember like feeling this.
Happy tears and the sound of their son laughing.
What?
Things that had disappeared from this family's life.
Yeah, I wanna try it again. So it's an amazing feeling. It feels so different from when I came in this morning. I just thought I didn't sleep well, but after I take the medication, it's like I don't feel tired at all.
Flumazenil is not a cure, but it's a treatment that can give people their lives back. More drugs are being developed to treat hypersomnia, and clinical trials are ongoing in the US and Europe. Some of those trials because of Rye's experience with flumazenil. Research to better understand the genetic basis is underway.
Starting to crack that nut of the genetic component, and it will point probably to some biology, and we're in the process of doing that, and some other groups as well at Stanford. Just got NIH funding to do that.
Thank you so much for coming.
Oh my gosh, thank you for letting me see that. That was so cool.
Yeah.
There are only 2 people in this room who truly understand what it feels like to lose your life to sleep. And now they are both wide awake.
So what do you guys think? Remember I told you? You have to think about the severity. What makes it different? If we just looked at the description, okay. Yeah. But how is it that you can experience that? To what extent? So people say, well, I haven't been sleeping. But if you haven't been sleeping, or you're sleeping to the extent of days and days, and you look at all the external factors. Is there substance use? Is there, inability to do things? You see the person slowly just decline in functioning. 20 hours a day. She slept 18-hour days. Yeah. Yeah. But for more information, it's there. I added the link. So
sleep.
It's tough. But then when we look at sleep disorders, we also have to look at what could be causing this. Yeah. The change in the medication, exactly. Psychoactive drugs. So psychoactive drugs fall under, this is the last section of tonight's lecture, but I think also the most interesting. It just keeps getting more interesting. Yeah. Psychoactive drugs fall under 3 departments: stimulants, depressants. We also have our lovely hallucinogens. And yeah, depending on what you're looking for in life, that's what we gravitate towards. So a lot of the resources that I've listed here are from the US Drug Enforcement Agency, as well as NIH, APA, the American Psychological Association. And we're also going to review, we're also going to look at one of the last videos, a CIA-led experiment with LSD called MK Ultra. So psychoactive drugs, they alter your consciousness. They range from stimulant to depressant to hallucinogen. So a stimulant is something that will get you going, keep you active. What falls under this is coffee, types of substances, coffee, caffeinated beverages, to cocaine. No. This is the one they did on humans. I'll show you MK Ultra is tonight, but when we get to sexual disorders and other CIA-led experiments, there's also one called Midnight Climax. Yes, Midnight Climax. Project Midnight Climax was a CIA, FBI-led operation, yes. So the drugs can be instrumental, be listed as recreational. You have ketamine, Special K, you have, it depends on the illness. Vitamin supplements can be, it depends on the illness, and it depends on the severity of the illness. But vitamin supplements can actually be cut into other substances to make it more potent and effective. So you have social recreational drugs such as psilocybin or mushrooms. You have MDMA, Molly, commonly known as well as ecstasy. Peer group influences usage of recreation drugs, including alcohol. Think about it. It's wine o'clock. You know, there was an increase in alcohol sales while, you know, we were in the midst of COVID. Isn't it amazing? A lot of states now see marijuana as medicinal after the restriction. Why? Because people who generally did not have to show up in person to work and could hide their abuse through a filter or use through a filter felt, you know what? You can pass this law. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. But all psychoactive drugs can lead to psychological dependence. Let's not fool ourselves. Every single one of them. You have amphetamines, you have barbiturates, you have cocaine, codeine, GHB, heroin. You have cannabis, which is always the big one. It's a hallucinogen. I don't have anything against it. Methadone, morphine, nicotine tranquilizers, all can be addictive. So stimulants are used to knock you out of your depression. The father of psychoanalysis, Freud, famously used cocaine with his patients. If he were practicing today, would be kicked out of every board, every whatever. But back then, cocaine was seen as not only cheap, even by their standards, by price standards a century ago, but also legal. You could purchase cocaine at your local pharmacy. MDMA, so methyl endidoxin methamphetamine. Methyl endidoxy methamphetamine, MDMA, is also seen as a stimulant in nicotine. So I'm not going to concentrate too much on nicotine because we will actually be addressing that later in this in the lecture series, but I did want to discuss cocaine. So this is directly from the drug, and it doesn't show the lovely link, but it's actually it's uploaded to Blackboard. So cocaine, what is it? Cocaine is a crystallized powder from the coca leaf. Isn't it interesting that cocaine, Coca-Cola, coffee all start with CO? Very easy to remember where it's derived from, coca. And yes, in soda products, cocaine was a part of the recipe when they first came out. We're talking about over a century ago. So street names, of course, are coca, cocaine, coke, crack, crank, flake. Some of the other ones are booger sugar. That seems to be a popular one too. Rock, snow, soda cot. Cocaine users will binge because the high that you experience the first time you use cocaine can never be replicated. It is a high like no other. Your brain gets a sense of this level of endorphin. It is like an absolute, it's like a vitamin C shot times 1,000. Imagine being happy. People who engage in cocaine, crack abuse are looking to suppress feeling depressed because it originally was an antidepressant. So it makes perfect sense if you are depressed and you use cocaine. So the government in the 1950s and 60s saw the effects of cocaine and how it quickly deteriorated the person's ability to function in society, as well as increase insomnia and have restlessness, irritability, cardiac arrest. It led to convulsions. It actually prompted certain other illnesses, seizure disorders, and it's because of the combinations that were given. And once again, when there was a cheaper form to be made, crack, the base of cocaine, saw what it did to communities. They took it, but they didn't take it necessarily for the danger. They took it because they knew they could weaponize it. So a stimulant referred to as ecstasy or MDMA, Molly. Molly is still one of the more popular party drugs. Ecstasy comes in pill or powder form, special logos. Street names are Atom, Biscuit, Clarity, Disco Biscuit E, Eve, Hug Drug, Peace, and etc. It's swallowed in gel capsule form, Molly. Bath salts are part of the makeup now. And what happens is, because of the potency of the bath salt, it actually creates that level of euphoria and an appetite that mimics that of a cannibalistic perception. So there were cases when MDMA really started to gain notoriety in the public eye because people became so paranoid. They started to exhibit certain cannibalistic qualities. Most prevalent, especially on the genetic makeup of MDMA, is a specific chemical that it's almost a psychotic twinge where people feel that they have the capacity to eat their own flesh. And I'm going to go through this because I want to make sure we're able to see the video. So amphetamines. Amphetamines is tricky when it comes to regulating because it is the drug used to help stabilize and compete with the level of multitasking and underlying anxieties when it comes to attention deficit disorder and attention deficit disorder with hyperactivity. It's used to aid in concentration. It's used to focus. If you want to have a drug to help you focus, but yet speed up your ability to concentrate at extreme rates, amphetamines is one. And the pushing of amphetamines has now increased in students, especially with more self-directed study. You saw it a lot in colleges. You also saw it a lot in private schools with high achieving kids, with a school that needs to maintain a level of academic excellence. So street names are uppers, speed, ice. It's also referred to as crank, black beauties, bennies, because of the type of pill forms that it may come in, but also ice because there is a cooling effect if you have certain amounts of your body. Amphetamines were also used as diet pills. Speeds up your metabolism. The other thing is it also lowers your blood temperature. So one of the reasons why they call it ice is because ice came about after there was a prevalence of murderers. I'm not going to mince words, murderers who were utilizing this drug to help calm the body down, or better yet, reduce the body temperature during acts of sexual congress, because they had a subset beyond just being a murderer of necrophilia, which is a desire to sleep with a deceased person, an attraction to dead people. So that's stimulants. Now we're going to go to opiates, which is a depressant. So opiates and alcohol are depressants. Now, I'm not going to play the video about alcohol because it's for teens, but it will be up in the presentation. However, the recent, I hate saying it as recent, and I will say hate. It's not recent, but the opiate epidemic can be traced to several pharmaceutical company practices. And the Sackler family is a family, it's a great topic for current event analysis, but the Sackler family is one of these pharmaceutical companies, Purdue Pharma. They are responsible for so many forms of illegal, unethical practices to get people to buy their product, to be addicted to their product, knowing what the product can do to the person. Now, there, of course, is a argument that it's the people's choice to be, to engage and to take this product, right? What's the difference between junk food or fast food or engaging in other behaviors? Well, when this is a class A medication and you require a doctor to prescribe it, and you can't just go out and, buy it in a fast food drive-through, it becomes different. So I want you to take a look at this and then we'll discuss.
This year has led to the beginnings of a reckoning for the manufacturers, marketers and distributors of opioids. The epidemic has taken hundreds of thousands of American lives over the past 2 decades. Multi-billion-dollar settlements have been announced. But there is great anger. Many states say there is not enough accountability and transparency over the company's roles. Purdue Pharma, which created OxyContin and is controlled by the Sackler family, is the biggest target. As Amna Nawaz tells us, there's new information about how the company responded in the earliest days.
Judy, the information comes from newly unsealed court documents that include Richard Sackler's emails in the late 90s. Sackler was a senior vice president of the company at the time, 1 year after OxyContin was launched. By 1999, he was president of Purdue Pharma. The documents were part of a court case against Purdue Pharma in Kentucky, and as part of that case, Richard Sackler was deposed in 2015. Stat News has been working to get these documents for 4 years, and Casey Ross of Stat joins me now. Casey Ross, welcome to the News Hour. Help us by understanding what is the new information you've learned from these court documents when it comes to Purdue Pharma, the Sackler family that owns it, and OxyContin.
Well, these documents really shed light on the interactions that the Sackler family, in particular, Dr. Richard Sackler, had with executives at the company during the key time period in which OxyContin was being released into the marketplace.
And what is that connection based on what you've seen so far?
The emails that we found in these court records discuss Richard Sackler becoming aware at a very early point in OxyContin's release of concerns that a large pharmacy benefit manager was expressing to doctors about abuse potential in the drug. And Dr. Sackler responded to that concern by calling for a presentation, specifically in which he suggested that the presentation could be given to show that controlled release opioids like OxyContin were less subject to abuse potential, addiction concerns, and diversion than other opioids. And at the time, there was no, and since there's no evidence to support that.
How would you characterize the response to some of those concerns at the time? And also, why was it important at this particular point in history?
Well, so this is a time period when OxyContin is just being released into the market. Executives at the company, based on the concerns, were very worried that they were going to get essentially blocked out of the market because Merck Medco, which is the pharmacy benefit manager that raised these concerns, controlled a large part of the access to the marketplace. So if Merck Medco is refusing to cover these drugs out of abuse concerns, then Purdue Pharma is in a situation where it cannot distribute its product to the extent that it wants. It cannot tap a very lucrative market for chronic pain patients.
Casey, you mentioned some of the concerns raised by Merck Medco. They said that addiction could be one of their potential concerns. I want to read you an excerpt from one of the emails you published. It's from Richard Sackler. He says, "We should consider that, quote, addiction may be a convenient way to just say no. And when this objection is obliterated, they will fall back on the question of cost unless we can give a convincing presentation that CR, that is controlled release products, are less prone to addiction potential." Based on these emails that you've seen, Casey, is this unusual for a pharmaceutical executive to basically be pushing to get his product out there and tamp down on concerns?
I think that it's not unusual for pharmaceutical executives when they're launching a product to try to protect its reputation and push it into the marketplace in a way that's going to be beneficial to the company. I think here the situation is that OxyContin is an opioid. It's a drug which contains a lot of inherent addiction potential. So it's something that's sensitive, and I think that these documents really shed light on the extent to which, despite those potential concerns about addiction, the company was intent on aggressively marketing the product.
Casey, the big question is, now what? There have been a lot of questions about what the Sackler family knew and what they didn't know. There's ongoing litigation. There's a tentative settlement. What do these new emails tell us, and do they change how things could move forward at all?
Well, that's going to be a question for authorities across the country who are evaluating how this circumstance ought to be resolved in terms of the financial liability that the Sackler family might face ultimately for the addiction problems that are ongoing in communities across the country. So there are attorneys general, states across the country and other jurisdictions that are refusing to sign on to a settlement with the Sackler family right now that would resolve those concerns, because they're concerned that the family is not being held accountable enough financially for the harm that has been caused. So I think that's going to be a question in light of these records that folks are going to continue to focus on, and we'll have to see what the result is.
Casey, I should mention a lawyer for the Sackler family, in response to your article, said there was nothing improper in those emails. They say the emails discuss how doctors who prescribed OxyContin were upset that insurance companies wanted to avoid paying for their patients' medicine. They also say that Dr. Sackler was just responding by asking whether it would be accurate to make a presentation to the insurance companies, that they deferred to produce in-house experts. What do you make of the Sackler family's response?
Well, they're emphasizing essentially that he did defer to company experts in asking the question of whether that presentation could be given. And they also pointed to Dr. Sackler's 2015 deposition, in which he said, look, I was just asking a question here as to whether a medically correct presentation could be given to show the claim that I'd like to make. But I think it's really up to the public and authorities to consider whether or not the presentation that he was calling for had an effect on marketing OxyContin in a deceptive way, ultimately.
So what do you guys think? You said, what's the difference between this family or this person and drug dealers? And I said, location. That's pretty much all it is. If there is a product that they're looking to move, and they're looking to have other people continue to take, knowing the devastation, they did not, whether they did not foresee the level of connection or the level of attention or need, and how it would populate into society in certain areas in society, because it's not so much who's being abused, it's where they're being abused. Because you have people who now have such a bad opiate problem that people who live in Seattle, Washington, Puget Sound area, live on the coast, multi-million, billion-dollar tech giants. Because of the excessive amount of abuse, the water, the ecosystem has been destroyed. And I'll explain how. If you have drugs, opiates in your system, there's certain drugs that your body cannot break down. So it's going to pass through your system. When it does, unfortunately, we have water cleaning filtration systems. We pass whatever we have in our system, and it's filtrated into, certain, whether it's waste, and then they treat the water, but then they treat the water and it flows right out into the sea. Here's why they know it's a problem. There's so many people abusing this substance that not only is it hurting the ecosystem, they're actually seeing sea life addicted to opiates. When you fish and you see clams, fish coming out high, pupils dilated, looking as if they are addicted like humans, and they're tested and the potency, the level of opiates in their system is off the charts, that's a problem. So what do? Well, multi-billion-dollar lawsuits fly. You lose your status in society because these are people who put their name on just about everything. And they had removals, I want to say 2019. OxyContin came out around 2002. Yeah. Big drug. They knew what they were doing, but the fact that it didn't just affect certain communities where they may be able to get away with it, it affected communities that said, you know what, now it's a problem. Now they're struggling. So that is for opiates. Barbiturates are also depressant. Barbiturates are those drugs that you always hear celebrities die from. That is one of the easiest ways to remember when you're taking your quiz. Anything that ends in like a tall, phenobarbital, propranolol, like those drugs, those heavy duty drugs. Barbiturates are one of the drug classes that kill you with like alcohol. You have to medically detox from a barbiturate the way you would medically detox from alcohol. Opiates and cocaine, not really. You no longer have to medically detox the way you would barbiturates. Barbiturates can kill you just with one use. Cocaine and heroin can't do that. Yes, fentanyl can kill you with the assistance of lung organ failure, but just having barbiturate intoxication, that's different than overdose. So those psychoactive drugs, that numbing, that tranquilizing feeling, barbiturates, it's alcohol, barbiturates, and benzodiazepines. Those are the three classes of drugs that can kill you just by intoxication. You can have alcohol intoxication. You can't have cocaine intoxication. Any questions? Comments? Michael Jackson, Prince, Elvis, all died from a barbiturate. Marilyn Monroe. The list can go on. Barbiturates is probably yes, alcohol, but it's really barbiturates is the #1 drug that kills most celebrities. So we're going to also review alcohol with nicotine a little bit further, further on in the semester. So I'm not going to concentrate too much on it. But alcohol is most heavily abused drug in the US, even more so than nicotine. We talked last week about binge drinking, about how people get into their bodies, soaking tampons, ocular drinking. I haven't heard of auditory drinking as of yet, but there's always something on the horizon, and there's always something new to learn. But the pace of consumption of alcohol is so deadly that even just drinking it at a certain pace can kill you. So I did want to show you what your brain, they would say, this is your brain on drugs. This is, it was a common commercial, I would say 30, 40 years ago. But this is also your brain, and see the connection with Alzheimer's. Alzheimer's and alcoholism, as well as dementia, have a common thread. There's a degeneration of cells. There's a lot of space here. The connective tissue, there's so much space. The gray matter has disintegrated. There's no time span. This is just the brain. It's a comparison of elderly brain. If you're talking about the effects of the alcohol, there really isn't, it depends on the person. It depends on the potency of how much they're drinking, what they're drinking, potency and frequency. Because if you're drinking grain alcohol, if you're drinking moonshine and you're taking a shot a day, the equivalency of that, if you're drinking, a 6-pack a day, you're probably going to see a difference. But if you're drinking a shot of grain alcohol a day, you're most likely going to have quicker degeneration than that of a 6-pack because of the amount of alcohol that you're consuming in that time span. So when you meet with somebody for the first time, you always ask, excuse me, what do you drink? Not so much how much do you drink, what do you drink? So the last section is is just going to discuss hallucinogens. So before we start the video, CIA. The CIA is an interesting entity, and I say that kind of quietly just based on where I live and where I operate daily. And family members I live around, or family members who I see daily, or any government agency. So the CIA has mind control experiments. Why? Because it's a government agency, and like anything, it wants to learn how to have the upper hand on certain things. I'll say that out loud. The CIA during the 1950s and 60s were looking to find a way to weaponize medications, because the wars that they knew they'd be fighting would not necessarily always be on foot. They had a project that became very, very public for a horrible, horrible reason. Well, several. One, because one of the people who volunteered and was a participant in the experiment is Ted Kaczynski. So I'm going to play this video, and I'm going to ask you guys to tell me who Ted Kaczynski is and why this is so bad.
In the wake of World War II, the U.S. government is engaged in a large number of secret medical experiments designed to help win the Cold War. Developing techniques for mind control to create a so-called Manchurian candidate. What is the extent of these brainwashing experiments? How did the CIA become involved in such far-reaching and disturbing research? In May 1953, scientists at Porton Down are researching one of the most lethal nerve agents known to man, sarin. The experiments are conducted on military volunteers, but the young servicemen have no idea what they are letting themselves in for.
On the board there was a separate notice typed, which said in so many words, volunteers wanted to help find a cure for the common cold.
By volunteering, Ken Earl becomes an unsuspecting guinea pig in the war against the Soviets. On May 4th at Porton Down, he and 5 other Air Force men are led into a small room by 2 technicians.
We were told by the 2 men to roll up the left sleeve. These 2 men then took 2 pieces of material and they taped them to our forearm. They then gave us each a respirator, and that we were not, under any circumstances, to take off the respirator. And the door was sealed behind us. It was very, very poky, a small building. And I found out since it was a gas chamber, which puts the fear of death into you, of course. But this technician, with a vial and a pipette, went round each of us, and he dripped onto this piece of material 20 drops in 2 rows.
The clear liquid is sarin nerve agent. It is quickly absorbed into the arm through the skin. The effects are immediate.
I became absolutely claustrophobic. I didn't know what sheer terror there is in being trapped and not being able to breathe properly. You feel you can't breathe. I was sweating profusely. And I now, even today, have nightmares about it. After half an hour, we were released, gasping and spluttering and sweating into the open air. Beautiful sunny May morning. Absolute bliss. What a wonderful thing to be alive.
The corresponding paperwork clearly states the purpose of the experiment is to determine the lethal dose of sarin. After the Korean War, disturbing new intelligence reaches Washington. Hundreds of American troops are still being held captive, subjected to brainwashing experiments, and then killed. Mind control research back home intensifies. The new goal is to cause an individual to become subservient to an imposed control, to the point where he will perform acts against his will and then have no memory of the act. The search for a real-life Manchurian candidate begins. To produce such an assassin, the CIA faces two main challenges: how to induce amnesia and how to program in new behavior. In 1957, Dr. Ewan Cameron, an eminent psychiatrist in Montreal, believes he has the answers. Cameron applies his techniques under the guise of normal therapy.
There's a three-part technique which started with an effort to wipe out past patterns of behavior. And this was accomplished through the use of particularly intensive, repeated, high-level electroshocks until no more convulsions could be elicited from a patient.
Cameron then plays tape-recorded messages through helmets that are locked to his patients' heads. This psychic driving forces them to listen to repetitive statements for weeks on end, to program in new behavior.
Now, the final phase was to try to wipe out all recollection of what had happened. And that was accomplished by putting people to sleep for 30, 40 days, accompanied by different kinds of cocktails of drugs. Now, that's not any kind of therapy. That's a brainwashing experiment.
So, Ted Kaczynski. Any reason why I may want to bring him up? Right. What happens when one of the people who participate, and this is a longer term study. Yeah. So they're using medications such as sarin gas. And I say medications because initially some of these drugs were used as nerve agents, used to help people, but they said, we can weaponize this. LSD, lysergic acid dithylamide, phencyclidine, PCP, all of these drugs were used to help mind control as well as to create your perfect soldier. Nope, sarin was what was dripped on them. So these aren't even drugs that you necessarily ingest or inject, you absorb. So sarin gas, out of that, we got sarin gas. So they wanted to see the potency of it when you had it absorbed, maybe you took it, you ingested it, but then the mass, the purpose of the mass was to see if you need the proximity, where if it was, you presented like smoking cigarettes, you have a certain smoke, secondhand smoke, secondhand sarin. Now they were able to say, okay, so what would happen if we put them in a room and that happened? This wasn't an experiment done on cats or animals, it's done on humans. So LSD, psychoactive. People dropped LSD, very much commonly known as acid. Some of the best ideas came also from people who had these highly potent hallucinogenic effects from these substances. Steve Jobs, if you have an iPhone, you may want to look at LSD in a different way. Steve Jobs dropped acid. Not saying that it's something you should do. I'm saying that we have to look at the drug in all forms. We can't demonize it because of how some people have chosen to use it, how it's been weaponized. Mushrooms, the active agent, psilocybin. has been used more recently to help with depressive states, especially for people who are schizophrenic. Ketamine, known as Special K, has been used for people who have treatment-resistant depression. So this is a depressive state where you have tried just about everything, and now you're looking towards transmagnetic stimulation or electroconvulsive therapy because you need to shock your brain out of the neural pathways it's created towards your distress. Psilocybin, yeah, hallucinogenic but beneficial. Yes, they do still do ECT on patients. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And we'll get into that later in the semester. Yeah, it is still being done. I have several students who have admitted that they have gone through ECT recently. Electroconvulsive therapy, known as shock therapy. It does not look the same as it does in movies and yeah. Depending on where you're getting it from, it can be. It can be. I've had people who had treatment-resistant depression and they needed some form of stimulation. I do not recommend ECT. I've seen it done more so ECT with people who have schizophrenia and in, correctional facilities. It's very scary to witness in person. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of memory loss before and after. Yeah, and before, because if you've had it, after you've had it done the first time, you start to notice you have gaps in your memory, and also the verbiage that you use. It's like word salad. It's literally scrambling of your brain. It's trying to reset your brain and reset the chemicals so that dopamine, norepinephrine, and serotonin can go from one side of your brain to the other without any interruption. So of course now we get to the most popular drug, even though alcohol is the most used. This is the most contentious and popular drug out there, cannabis. Oh, yeah. Poor thing. Yeah. That makes sense. Jesus. Yeah. So last but not least, cannabis. You can go to DISA, DISA. You'll see it in references and look up the most recent medicinal and decriminalized statuses per your state. Cannabis helps with pain relief. It can assist in depression where the symptom, if you have major depressive disorder or a form of depressive disorder, and this one of your symptoms is anxiety, cannabis can be beneficial. If you have an anxiety disorder, that's where it gets tricky. Not everybody who has an anxiety disorder and they take cannabis, it helps. And it depends on the type, it depends on the strain, it depends on how you take it into your body, it depends on how you process it. Everybody has their own recipe in terms of how cannabis is effective towards them. Some people get very anxious and they're like, why doesn't this work? Because your anxiety level surpasses that of what the cannabis can do. And by the time you get the type of cannabis that can match the level of anxiety and can make a dent in that anxiety, the level of criminalization has already surpassed the cannabis. It now has to be either genetically modified, because that's where we're going, because the new area in pharmaceutical ventures is not cocaine, it's not even tobacco or continuation tobacco and making cocaine legal, it is cannabis. Dispensaries, methods of getting into your body, cooking mechanisms, all ways to get cannabis into your body. But are you looking for the relief or the hallucinogenic effects? Because you can get the relief and use gummies and have a medicinal or have CBD oil, and you can get the relief. But the problem is, are you looking for the side effects, hallucinogenic effects? So that's where we struggle in the community, both criminal and psychological, medical period, where it's helpful when you are getting relief from it on the medical side, you're relieving stress and pain, but when you start to have that hallucinogenic effect and it starts to alter how you function and your reflexes slow down, that's where it becomes a problem. Now the question is, what makes it different from any other drug? Because you can't drive when you have Klonopin, right? Or can you? The doctor doesn't pull you over and said, I'm sorry, do you have a bag of Klonopin on you? Are those a bag of benzos? If they're prescription, it's not a problem. But if it's cannabis and it's prescription, it still can be a problem. Every state has something different. One of the worst things to do in this country is to not make cannabis nationally legal, but to do it state by state. Because you can go to jail in Alabama, where in Georgia it's legal or it's not criminalized, or you can go to jail in Virginia, where in DC it is completely legal. It's legal, all forms of cannabis, as well as it's decriminalized. I don't have a for or against. I look at what it does for you versus what it can do to you. So, any questions, comments? A lot of information, a lot of good resources. I also included some references. Now, all of the articles that you can use them as, not the articles themselves as resources. So you can go to the websites and look at other articles, but the articles that I included, they cannot be used for your next current event analysis paper. However, you can read the article and look up other articles, intent, and you can take it from there. So you will be seeing your current event analysis grades. If there's any issue, I will contact you independently. I would give myself till Thursday. But if not, your grade will be posted by Sunday, both for your paper and the discussion board post. But other than that, I hope you guys have a good night. I recommend going to Calm. And I will see you next week for chapter 6. Take care.